Okay, so this section is going to be on current issues that are known with full self-driving in Australia. So these are just things to be aware of. The reason I did this video is because for people who are new to the system, it's good to know what to look out for, right? Now, FSD won't always make these mistakes. It may never make these mistakes for you, but these are things that have been observed by myself over the last 8,000 kilometers of using it, and what I've observed online and social media, forums, YouTube videos, everything. So this is basically the things to look out for. So the first one is pulling out into traffic. Now, this issue stems from the fact that FSD, as it currently stands, the way it sort of views the world, the way its depth perception works, sort of when it extrapolates from the different camera views, isn't perfect. So say you're coming into you're coming off a side road. So FSD's stopped. It wants to turn into the lane. Now you got a car coming from this direction. Now FSD doesn't always get this right, and it will, in some cases, rare cases, pull out late. Now you got to be aware of this. I'm not going to mince my words. You got to be aware of this because it will basically make a mistake that any human would make. In these cases, just beware. So when you come up to these kind of situations, be foot near the pedal, be ready to take over. It's difficult because what FSD does do, let's just say there's like a hedge here. FSD will come up to this section of road and it may stop here initially. But then what it will do is it will slowly creep forward a little bit towards here so it can get a bit of visibility beyond this bush here. The issue is you can't know if that forward movement, is it committing to the full turn or if it's just doing that sort of slow creep forward. Now, best case scenario, you've got a passenger who is looking at the visualization, and if you've watched the visualization section previously in the video, you'll know that it sort of has a indication of whether it's planning to do something or not. At this point in time, I suppose as people get more confident with FSD, they can kind of tell when it's doing that sort of slow creep forward or when it's actually committing. As a general rule though, if you're starting out, for sure, always be ready to stop, just in case. And that is the case also for roundabouts. FSD currently is not great at roundabouts. It's pretty good, but it's something that hasn't really been trained on that much in the US. And so with roundabouts is also the added layer of indicator usage. Let's say you come into a roundabout and the car is to your right and it's indicating. Horrible roundabout, but anyway. FSD is coming in. It's waiting. And let's just say this car is coming through here. And it's trying to go this way. Now, obviously, it's indicating to go left. FSD, its reading of indicators isn't 100%. Doesn't always pick it up. So what FSD may do here is that it may just decide to wait. It won't go. Even though this car, to your eyes, is clearly indicating. Something to be aware of. Another thing that can happen is that the reverse can be true. It can be indicating to go right. Now, FSD may, in this case, think that it's actually going left. Now, it has two ways of detecting where the car is going to go. It judges it based on its trajectory. So the speed and the motion of the car, the direction it's moving, it may make a judgment call to say that it thinks it's going to go this way. But in this particular case, because it thinks it's going this way, and it also misreads that it's indicating right, like it doesn't pick up that the car is indicating right, it will pull out. You got to be aware of this as well. So explaining this because, in case anyone's wondering, why would it do that? You know, it's so obvious that the car is going to go forward because it's, you know, indicating right. Just explaining how FSD can fall down in these circumstances. So just be very vigilant. Another thing with roundabouts is that when it comes to lanes, if you've got multi-lane roundabout and you're sort of trying to make this a bit better. Another thing to be aware of, if you're entering the roundabout, and let's just say the left lane can go straight forward, but not right. The right lane can only go right. Another thing you got to be aware of is that FSD may get into this left lane here and decide that it's going to get here and then exit. Now, whether that's allowed or not on the roundabout is pretty well indicated here. But obviously it's not allowed, so you just can be aware that pretty easy to tell. So coming up to a roundabout, if you can like look at the sign, tell which lane goes where. Now, if you know you need to turn right at the roundabout, take the third exit, and the navigation is telling FSD that it needs to do that, but you notice that FSD gets into the left lane, then be aware that it's most likely going to try and make an illegal maneuver and turn right from the left lane in this case. So just some behaviors at the roundabout that can be observed with FSD, stuff to be aware of. In general, when it comes to roundabouts and other issues with navigation, just keep an eye on what the navigation is telling FSD to do and try and pick up any differences between what the nav says FSD should do and what it's actually doing. That will help you quite a bit, and that will allow you to pretty much pick up most of the issues that FSD will have ahead of time, which is great when it comes to obviously saving your sanity. So next one is late lane changes. This is the most, behind speed issues is the most common issue with FSD currently. So let's just say, as I said before, let's just say you're on a road and there is 3 lanes. One turns right only, one goes through only, one goes left only. And you're, this is not to scale, but let's just say you're 500 meters out. Then you get to 300 meters out. Navigation is telling you you've got to go this way, but FSD is in this lane. What will typically happen is FSD will wait until about 200 meters out to get into that right lane. Now, as I said in the tips before, you can indicate yourself to get FSD over into that lane early. But it's also worth noting that if you don't do that, in most cases, it will wait until about 200 meters out. Not always, that's the thing about FSD, is that none of this is 100%. Some days it will get in early at about 500 meters, even a kilometer out. Some days it will wait till 100 meters out. But vast majority of the time, in my experience, it's about 200 meters out. So obviously this becomes an issue if you have a bunch of cars that are queued up in this lane and, you need to get in. They're not always going to let you in. Worth noting that in this case, FSD isn't always the most graceful when it comes to dealing with this issue. What it will do is, sometimes, is it will get up to about here and it will slow right down, and it's like, please let me in, please let me in, which impedes traffic behind it. So just, again, like I said with the roundabout thing, be aware of what the navigation is telling FSD to do, and if it differs to what it's actually doing. Because whenever those two things diverge, you're going to have issues that you're going to be aware of. Alright, so the next issue is speed loss, which is definitely the most common issue that FSD can have currently in Australia. So this happens in a couple of different circumstances. Some of them are reasonable, some of them are not reasonable. The most common, unfortunately, is the unreasonable type, where, let's just say a road is 60 km an hour. FSD may, enter that road and it may go 260 initially. But what it will then do is it will, over the course of whatever period of time, gradually, lose speed. Then you tap the accelerator and it goes back up to 60, and then you stick there for 30 seconds, and then it will start daydreaming again and start going down. So this is what we call speed bleed. That's the one type. It's the most common type. Also very prevalent on 110, especially 110k an hour highways. People have noted it extensively. Apparently the Hume Highway in Australia is particularly bad for it. Now, it seems for me to differ on highways, depending on which highway it's on. If I'm heading from, let's just say, New South Wales border to Brisbane, it's fine. But if I'm heading from Brisbane up to the Sunshine Coast, north of Brisbane, it's not fine. So I'm not sure about this one. It's very strange. But what it will do is it will maybe start around 110, or maybe it will never reach 110, but it will always hover around 100, exactly 100, specifically. Thereabouts, 103, 93, 97, sorry. That's one circumstance where speed loss is a thing. The next one is, I suppose, more reasonable, in the sense that, let's just say you've got a road that bends around a regular radius. So in this case, FSD will just, maybe, let's just say it's 60k an hour road. It will probably, through this, go 50. It drops 10k's an hour on average. Or, depending on the radius, it will drop more. So let's just say this is a 50k an hour road. 50k an hour road. It will probably drop to 35 going through here because of the turn radius. And if it's a hairpin, it may drop all the way down to 10. Just it depends. But it's not like most people who seem to have the perfect traction sheet from Grand Theft Auto, where they can just go around a corner at full speed. I don't have that ability. And FSD knows that, comfort is also a thing. It won't, like, it can go through corners. And I've had it make what I would call a mistake, where it will go through a rural road at 80k's an hour through a bend like this at fully 80k's an hour, and it handles it fine, and the traction obviously handles it fine, but it's not comfortable. So yeah, the way FSD handles these things is it does it sort of from a comfort-based perspective. Slows down through bends. Just enough so that you're not feeling that much G-force, but not too slow. That being said, coming through, I find at least, and I've seen it noted by others, is through intersections. So, typical intersection where you just sort of go 4 different directions. For these common type turns, it will go through, I would say, about 15 to 25k's an hour. Most people go through 25 to 40k's an hour. If you're a ute driver, anything from 60 to 6 million k's an hour. So, yeah, just keep in mind that the way FSD goes, it's on the cusp of being uncomfortably slow. Not a safety thing, it's just more of a comfort thing. Just something to keep in mind. Another issue is rerouting. So again, let's say you've got a road, again, which has 3 lanes, one going right, one going straight, and one going left. So what FSD can do is it will make a mistake. So let's just say this car is queuing up in this straight lane, quite far back. Now it may think, oh, this is too slow, I'm going to get in the right lane, not realizing that the right lane is a turn-only lane. And it may get up to here. Red light. And so you've got a queue of traffic to your left here. FSD is sitting in the right lane. Now, what it will almost always do in this situation is it will, if navigation is telling it to go straight, it will go straight from the right lane legally. It is a mistake that it will make. So again, as I said before, notice the differences between navigation, what the navigation is telling FSD to do, and what it's actually doing. This is a particularly bad one. So if you notice that navigation is telling the car to go straight forward, but it's in the right turn lane, be ready to take over, because it will try to merge in. Now it won't collide with cars. That's another thing with FSD, is it will always avoid a collision, but it will just do a sneaky and just sort of wait towards the gap. It'll sort of creep forward, or if it can, just accelerate forward and just sort of get into the gap as necessary. It will do so safely, but it's illegal, so you can't let it do it. It's something to be aware of. Next thing is the wrong side of the road. Now, this is something I've not personally experienced myself, but it's been documented in many videos on like Facebook and people online and forums. So some circumstances where this can happen has been noted by many people. Is, let's just say you've got a... Sorry, wrong layer selected. So if we got a road coming up to a roundabout, but you've got one of those weird sort of diamond things that a sign will sit on, and maybe you've got sort of a line coming out of it. What FSD can do in these situations, not always, but what it can sometimes do is it gets confused, and it will try to go on the right hand side of the road. So pause that. That is one case where this has been observed and reported. So if you do see this kind of situation, just be ready, be aware to take over. Another case where it can make the wrong choice is at intersections. This has been noted again multiple times by people, where if it sort of needs to turn right, what it will do is it will sometimes, if there's a weird, again, the common theme here is these weird island things. If there's sort of a weird island thing here to sort of mark the divergence between lanes, it, for whatever reason, perceives this incorrectly, and it can sometimes try and go into here. Something to be aware of. Not as common as this, from what I can tell, but it can happen. So, again, something to be aware of. And the last one is the situation where you're on the like a rural road, and this is kind of related to another behavior that I'll mention later on. But let's just say you're going through a rural road. It's got a very gradual bend. You've got a double line in the middle here, which is indicating that obviously you can't cross. For whatever reason, when FSD sees these double lines, it loves to hug them quite closely. It will do that the whole way through. Now, the problem is sometimes it gets a bit overzealous and it misjudges. And what it can actually do is end up going to the wrong lane. Now, this is quite rare to see, but some roads it will happen on. So you just need to be very aware on rural roads in particular, because obviously this is a blind bend. If there's a car coming the other way, at this point in time, FSD can't see it, but it will come very fast around this bend. This is the most dangerous mistake that FSD can make. This is something that you need to be very aware of. I'm not saying this to scare, I'm just letting you know that it's something you need to be aware of, because it will, in some cases, do this. In my experience of driving 8,000 kilometers in FSD, it's never done it for me, but I have seen it reported multiple times by other people. So just to give you an idea of the frequency of that, some people it happens quite often, other people it doesn't always happen. I do quite a bit of rural driving, and I've not personally experienced it. Next issue is the merging behaviors. So the best way I can describe this is it basically crowds other vehicles, I would say. So you got a roadway here that sort of merges in, So let's just say you've got one or more lanes, and it sort of collapses in. Now in this case, FSD doesn't always judge this kind of merging behavior perfectly. So say FSD is in this situation here, and there is a car here. It will leave probably a 2-car gap. It will leave just enough space for the car ahead to merge. So just be aware of that. I've had instances where it will sometimes not detect this car properly, and it will actually move ahead and get alongside, which makes it quite awkward for obviously this car. And the reverse can be true. FSD can be in the left lane and need to be merging in. Now what it will always do is it will wait to the very last minute to get across. Now this is technically the right thing to do, but if you're uncomfortable with that kind of thing, just be aware. It is what it does. It can also be a bit tricky if, for instance, there's a truck in this lane. It doesn't consider that. It will keep going, and then it will just sit here waiting until the truck's gone, then merge across. So if you've got a lot of aggressive drivers around you, you may be sitting here for some time, but just something to be aware of. It does, it leaves space for cars, but it leaves the bare minimum. So you may annoy people like that, or it may annoy you because, you know, you like to be more courteous, but it's just something to be aware of. And another issue is queue cutting, which I guess relates to the earlier issue of not getting over early enough, but it's not always the case. So let's just say you've got a road. This is a common example for me, at least. You've got a road where you have 2 lanes. Let's just say one goes right and one goes left, and you have an intersection. Obviously, did that wrong. Obviously, you'll have another lane here, but just for illustration purposes, let's just say there is a bunch of cars in this left lane queuing up, and FSD will, let's just say, it will be the back of this queue. Now, FSD is not very patient. It wants to get where it wants to go as fast and efficiently as possible. Again, it doesn't have emotions, it's just a robot. It just wants to do things as efficiently as possible. So let's just say it's here. In almost all cases, what it will try and do is get up to about here. And it will start indicating about here. And then sometimes it will get to about here and slow right down and try and get in. Sometimes if it can't get in, it just keeps going, but a lot of the time it will be very persistent. Now, this is a tricky one because it's a perfectly legal thing to do. And technically speaking, if we were to use the roads to their absolute efficiency, maybe, you know, using both lanes and then zipper merging in tidally is the way to go. But it's not how humans drive at the end of the day. So just be aware that FSD will basically do itself a mischief and try and cut in at the last minute. Some people will like that. Some people will hate that. I hate it personally, but again, something to be aware of as an issue. What I call an issue. The next issue is transit lanes. So, at least in Queensland, there are many cases where you'll have a lane which is dedicated as a transit lane. Now these lanes can only be entered if you have a second occupant passenger, at least one passenger. And they are normally active in certain hours, let's just say between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. So again, let's just say there's a bunch of traffic in the right lane because people are being diligent and not using the T2 lane, T3 lane, or bus lane it also includes bus lanes, worth noting, illegally. So they're queuing up like this. Maybe there's 1 or 2 cars in here. FSD detects that. It will be here. And it's like, oh, okay, traffic's slower in this lane. It's faster in this lane. It doesn't know about this. And it will get into the T2 lane. Now, this isn't always the case. I've noticed that I want to say about 70% of the time it does this. Now, at least in Queensland, these things are very heavily policed, so you'll get a ticket if you are driving in a T2 lane when you're not supposed to be. In New South Wales, from my knowledge, these T2 lanes are actually accessible by EVs, so this won't be an issue there. But at least if you're in Queensland, I'm not sure about all the state rules, but if you're in Queensland, like I am, this is something to be aware of. Now, in all states, you cannot use a bus lane unless you're turning. So, but there's a rare case that I experienced myself, which is when there's one intersection in particular where there is a bus-only turn lane, which has a dedicated signal for buses, which goes green to allow the bus lane, which is this one here, to go before the primary lane goes. The reason this being is that the bus can then safely take up 2 lanes to turn, because it's just a particularly tight street. It's more of a safety thing. It's quite rare, but unfortunately for me, it's what exists on my commute. So in this case, FSD will, again, if there's people will be queuing up here because obviously cars are not allowed in this bus lane. FSD does, in all cases, try to get into this lane here. Bit of an edge case, but it is something that happens. Something to be aware of. Transit lanes and bus lanes. In most cases, bus lanes are not accessible unless turning. So this is not just an issue in this circumstance. It's an issue wherever there's a bus lane in a similar circumstance to what this T2 lane is. You'll be aware that it will, in some cases, try and enter those lanes. Another thing to be aware of. The next issue is tailgating. So it doesn't tailgate in what most people will consider tailgating, which is to say, you know, literally right up behind the car in front. Not to that extent. But what it does do is, if there is, let's just say, a highway is a good example. So you got a car in front, that's going 90. Let's just say the highway is 100. Car in front's going 90. FSD is wanting to go 100. So in this case, what it will do is it will get right up behind, then change lanes. This is regardless of if there's any cars in here or not. Doesn't matter. It's always the same maneuver. It's sort of like it's I don't know if it's designed as like a warning maneuver to the car in front. But anyway, it gets uncomfortably close to the car in front. Probably in some cases I've had it get less than 2 car lengths at 100 km an hour, which if this car had to brake suddenly, even if FSD can react in nanoseconds, it's not a matter of reaction time at that distance. It's a matter of you physically will not be able to stop in time. It's physics at that point. So that's why I find it uncomfortable. And that just goes to show, in all cases on highways where FSD, regardless of the speed cars are going, it will, I find, sit about like 1.5 seconds away, which is not good. I mean, I believe 2 seconds is the minimum that you want to travel the car in front. But that also takes into account human reaction time. So maybe they do this because FSD can react a bit faster. But the problem comes when the road is wet, because it won't always, well, it doesn't seem to take into account wet weather as well. Now, if it's detected that there's wet weather, it will give you a warning on the screen saying, you know, adverse weather detected, FSD is degraded. in which case it will slow down a bit. But if it's just rained and it's not currently raining, but the road's still wet, it will drive like it's dry, and it will leave a gap like it's dry. And just something to be aware of. There isn't a way to set the increment to how far you can follow a car like you can with autopilot. There's no way to do that with FSD. FSD goes the distance it wants to go. Just something to be aware of. Just in summary, the issues that I've covered here in this video, again, you may experience all of them, you may experience none of them, you may experience some of them sometimes, you may experience some of them all the time. It all comes down to your circumstances, the road you're traveling, the areas you're traveling in, state you're in. Like for instance, New South Wales, the T2/T3 thing isn't really an issue because of the laws that allow EVs to go in transit lanes. So, what will be the case is that it won't always drive the same. You'll get days where it does things that it hasn't done before, and it feels like it's gotten worse, and the next day it will feel like it's the best it's ever been. But one thing that is always constant, again, is that it will make mistakes, and you just need to be ready to take over. So, but hopefully this video, having outlined everything that I personally know of as issues, you'll be able to go into it well equipped to see stuff coming and react accordingly. Yeah, be diligent, stay safe, and enjoy.